And one person now throwing her hat into the ring, former presidential candidate and Oprah's spiritual advisor, Marianne Williamson. Tonight, she is joining NewsNation Live with her plans to lead the Democratic Party into the future. Marianne, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining NewsNation Prime.
Oh, it's always good to see you. Thank you for having me.
So let's start here. The election, a disaster for Democrats. So much money down the drain, losses across the board, the White House, the Senate, and the House. What went so wrong?
Well, it began with the fact that we didn't really have a primary. The DNC simply decided that it was their right to decide that it would be Joe Biden as the candidate. That's not the traditional role of a political party. The political party is supposed to facilitate democracy, not manipulate it or try to engineer it. But they were very overt this time. They said, we've decided it's going to be Biden. And then they sought to de-amplify and peripheralize people such as myself, Dean Phillips, Bobby Kennedy, et cetera. And then, of course, they did the same thing with Kamala Harris. So there was the juice, kind of the excitement of a Democratic primary, the Democratic voters really having access, really being exposed appropriately on the media. That didn't happen. The excitement wasn't there. The juice wasn't there. And when you've got the kind of power that's coming at you with Donald Trump, you've got to be able to meet that with excitement and with magic that only real democracy can bring. And the Democrats messed up. And that's one of the reasons why I want to have a say in how we get back on track, because I saw up close and personal what went wrong.
Yeah, the real democracy was missing there. So after President Biden dropped out, it sounds like you're saying Democrats should have held a legitimate convention for a new nominee. What difference would that have made? Do you think Kamala Harris would not have made it out on top?
Well, I'm not saying that. Maybe the people would have chosen her. But the point is the people's choice. You know, Thomas Jefferson said the only safe repository for power in the United States is in the hands of the people. So, yeah, I mean, if the people chose Kamala, then great. But we should have had debates, and we could have also had a blitz primary even after the president dropped out. So, yeah, once again, let the people decide. It's about the heart of democracy, and that's what's going to have to change going forward, that we're going to have to rebuild the frayed bonds of affection between the Democratic Party and not only our own electorate, but the people in general. And that's what I want to bring to the party, having experienced not only so extensively voters all around this country, but also having spent time in the belly of the beast, you might say, inside the workings of the DNC and seeing how much that needs to change as well.
And I know you say that basically Democrats have lost the working class. You also say that Republicans are just better at energizing their base. So what can Democrats learn from Republicans there?
Well, you know, one of the reasons the Republicans are at this point better at energizing their base is because they maintain more contact with them. You know, a lot of the candidates for the DNC chair talk about a 50-state, 57-state plus territory strategy. I want to talk about a 365 days of the year strategy. I'm amazed sometimes when I talk to my Republican friends how well informed they are about the issues and the issues from the perspective of the Republican Party. We don't do enough of that. If I'm chair, we're going to have an infrastructure that creates far more communication going into the hearts and minds of the American people. This is what Trump is doing right now. This is the effect it will have in your life. This is what Democrats stand for in the House. This is what Democrats stand for in the Senate. This is what Democrats are doing all around the country in state houses around the country. This is how that would affect your life, and this is how you can participate in turning things around. We've got to repair the disconnection that has occurred between the party and our own base. The Democratic Party acts sometimes like it's trying to shrink its own base. You can't just show up for people every 2 years or 4 years and say, give me your money or give me your vote. I want to say to people, how can we help you?
And I'm struck by you saying that you're reaching out to your Republican friends as well. And, you know, that sort of flies in the face of what we're just seeing from Elon Musk on X, calling people contemptible fools who should be purged from the Republican Party, lashing out at a segment of MAGA. Do you have any response to that? Any thoughts on that?
Well, nobody, it's interesting. I wonder what Donald Trump is saying to Musk about that. I'm going to let the Republicans handle the Republican Party, but I know in the Democratic Party, we should not be turning away anyone who is interested in being part of the Democratic Party. And that kind of arrogance and sense of entitlement that sometimes too many people have felt, a kind of brushing off from the Democratic Party. That's what certainly will not happen if I'm DNC chair.
You've come out in support of Trump pick RFK Jr. to take on on health in this country. Tell me why you support his nomination.
First of all, look at what he's talking about already, getting these TV ads, these pharmaceutical company TV ads off. I've been talking about that throughout both of my campaigns. These things only started in the 1980s. The only other country, advanced nation, that has that is New Zealand. And I think those ads have had a kind of devastating effect. When you're talking about things like the colors, the dyes that we know are difficult. You know, one of the things that I talked about a lot on my campaign is if you look at the difference between a bottle of ketchup in the United States versus a bottle of ketchup in Canada. All of the ingredients that we allow, that we know are carcinogenic in the United States, that they do not allow in European countries, they do not allow in Canada. Why do we allow them here? We allow them here because certain big food companies have learned that these ingredients will increase the shelf life. And because it increases the shelf life of a product, it increases shareholder value, even though we know these things are carcinogen. So if Bobby Kennedy is talking about that, my only complaint is how could the Democratic Party allow the Republicans to take on the issue of health and standing for the health and the well-being of the American people, whether it has to do with big pharma, big insurance, big chemical companies, like in your in the thing that you're doing here on NewsNation.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that in just a moment. But very quickly, what would you say to those who are worried about RFK Jr.'s stance on vaccines, who are worried about his previous buy-in to conspiracy theories? If he, for example, wanted to ban fluoride in our drinking water, would you support that?
Well, first of all, I don't know what my ultimate conclusion would be, but if you read up on that and the European nations that have banned it, it's not this crazy idea when you look at all the European countries that are no longer going with the fluoride in the water. On terms of the other things, of course, infectious diseases is extremely important. We have to protect our children from measles and mumps. Of course, we have to have the polio vaccine. And I'm sure that cooler heads will prevail, whether they're Republican or Democrat, in making sure that nothing that happens under Bobby Kennedy's governance, if he in fact is confirmed, would go outside the box of what all of us know is a reasonable protection of America's children.
So I know you are passionate about chemicals, about carcinogens, about toxins that impact all of us. Let's talk about this because NewsNation, as you alluded to, recently spotlighted the issue of forever chemicals across our nation in this special called Growing Broke. What is your response to this special and how this impacts our food supply?
I want to congratulate you on this special. It's important, and it's very, very well done. I first learned about this issue when I was running for president in 2020. There's a town called Merrimack, New Hampshire, and there was a company called Saint-Gobain, and it's a French company. Now, this was very interesting because what was happening were companies coming over from other countries. They were spewing PFAS in the water, in the ground, in the air, and they were doing this in America because they weren't even allowed to do it because the environmental standards were so much more responsible in their own countries. When I was in Merrimack, New Hampshire, what I kept hearing about from people were the high rates of cancer because of this, and they could not get officialdom to listen. And this is what your program shows. Where was the EPA? Where was the FDA? And once again, it has to do with the corporate capture of our agencies. And in this particular issue of PFAS, and as your program shows, they knew about this back in the 70s. The big chemical companies, DuPont and so forth, they knew, whether it's that or the big food companies or the big insurance companies or the big pharmaceutical companies or the big oil companies or the gun manufacturers or the big defense contractors. This level of corporate tyranny, where short-term profit maximization for corporate entities is placed before the safety, health, and well-being of the American people. This has got to stop, and this is what the Democratic Party should stand for unequivocally.
Yeah, tell me more about what you call corporate tyranny. When it comes to health in this country, what are the large forces who are afraid of a shakeup that RFK Jr. could usher in? What industries, what big groups absolutely do not want questions to be asked and for the status quo to be re-examined when it comes to health?
Big insurance companies, big pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big agriculture companies, you know, which you can see from your program, as well as big chemical companies. When they have profit to be made, and it's the soulless strain of modern capitalism. It's not inherent in capitalism. There is such a thing as conscious capitalism. But what has happened now is this soulless, unethical, amoral perspective where if it is an increase in shareholder value, that's what matters. And people's children, whether our children are sick, whether our water is safe, whether our air is safe to breathe. Asthma in children in certain neighborhoods where children can't even run for 10 steps. We're all over the neighborhood, children like this, because of the toxins. And of course, that's usually in the poorer neighborhoods, because in the poorer neighborhoods, they don't have the political clout to fight back. At what point, what is happening to us? Our fertility rates are down, our cancer rates. Everybody knows this, by the way. And I don't care if people are on the left or the right. People are coming to the realization that there is a certain way in which American corporate profit-making potential is so infecting and infusing every aspect of American civilization that it is literally subjugating the American people to the point where, if they die, they die. You heard that woman on your program talking about working for United Health. And all of us have seen the incredible rage recently that people have on the denial of health benefits. We are the only advanced nation that does not have universal health care. We have 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt. We have over half of our bankruptcies are medical, and this is absolutely unacceptable. Over 1 million people who are rationing their insulin. People are waking up, and this is my point about the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party should be carrying this mantle. Many Democratic leaders are, but the face of the Democratic Party needs to really demonstrate the unequivocal advocacy for the safety, health, and well-being of every American.
And Marianne, we're almost out of time, but let me ask on a macro level, what needs to change for the Democratic Party? What is the one biggest stumbling block that you see? Is it that the party has lost the working class?
We've lost our spiritual, our emotional, our psychological connection to people. When I was growing up, there was no doubt about it. The Democratic Party was for the working people. And today, I have traveled all over this country. I meet people living with agonizing circumstances. It's not just that they have cancer, it's that they don't have health care. It's not just that they don't have a job, it's that one job cannot support a family. And I'm telling you, not enough of them feel the Democratic Party has my back. And if I'm chair of the DNC, first of all, they will know that the Democratic Party, at least in large part, does have their back, and it will be those leaders and those candidates that are trying to work in advocacy for the American people who will have far greater chance to be seen, be heard, and to win elections.
Marianne Williamson, I appreciate your time, as always. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.